Welcome back, everyone, to this week's episode of Talk Exchange. Today's guest is Amelia Rose Earhart. If that name sounds familiar, it's because she was named after the famous aviator Amelia Earhart. And today's guest is also a pioneer in female aviation because she did fly around the world. She also wrote a book where every chapter is essentially a life lesson. She is a very recognized professional speaker, and her personal story of accomplishment and overcoming obstacles is nothing short of amazing. She even put together her own finances and her own team of people to accomplish this flight. So her story, again, is amazing. It's full of inspiration, and we hope you get out of today's episode as much as we did during the interview. So hope you enjoy, and we'll see you again next week.
Welcome to Talk Exchange. I'm Tracy Edwards, CEO of the National Exchange Club.
And I'm Christy Lindahl, Director of Communications.
Christy, one of the most fun parts of our jobs, I think, is working with the speakers for our events and our national conventions. And I like how now we've decided to, well, we do keep in touch with some of them, which is really, really fun to stay in touch after we've built that relationship, working through getting them to the location and talking about their speech, telling them about exchange and what to expect. It's been so fun.
We built some personal relationships. You know, a lot of these people have personal stories, and we get to hear the story in full. You know, the people who are at the convention get the condensed version. So we get to know the speakers. And it's, you're right. It's one of the best parts of my job.
It is. And, you know, exchange is about relationships. And certainly as we work with people, we build those relationships. And it's fun to catch up with them. In fact, our next speaker, Amelia Rose Earhart, I remember we connected with her because I think I stumbled upon her on Twitter.
I think so.
And just immediately her name jumped out since Exchange has its history in female aviation. And we thought, let's check out her story.
Yeah.
And I know
Amelia Earhart was a good friend to Exchange.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it was, you know, we have pictures at headquarters of her walking through the Toledo airport field with our, you know, executive secretary at the time. And it was great.
And speaking at conventions,
Yeah.
all kinds of things with Amelia Earhart. So we were attracted to Amelia Rose Earhart as a result and brought her to our 2018 National Convention in Reno.
Yep.
And today we get to catch up with her. So welcome, Amelia. Great to see you again.
Well, blue skies, Tracy and Christy. I'm so happy to be back.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us. And we were catching up a little bit before we started recording. So I know you've written a book now, the book we remember hearing about, and a lot has happened. So fill us in on what you're doing today.
Well, first and foremost, let me say thank you for inviting me to be on the podcast today. I appreciate it. When I saw the email come through, I was flashed back to 2018 in Reno. And it was so wonderful because I remember that was a bit earlier on in my keynote speaking days. I wasn't as seasoned as I am now, right? And I remember feeling so bolstered by the confidence that I felt in that room, the acceptance, the warmth, the overall event was just so great. So thank you so much for putting me on that platform, because telling this story of what it's like to be named after Amelia Earhart, but asterisk, not related, as we know. We can dive more into that if you want, and really grow into this identity, has taken me through all these different twists and turns of becoming a pilot, becoming a helicopter news reporter for many years. Right during the pandemic, I left my TV news job and I went out on my own as a keynote speaker. So I just finished my first book actually 2 years ago in 2023 now. So I'm so proud of that. And it explores those flight lessons that I began sharing on stage back when we first connected.
Awesome.
Yeah, you're fierce.
You've made a lot happen since we saw you. Yes. So take us through the book journey. Flight lessons, are those things that people can apply to everyday life or their career, or take us through some of those lessons?
Yeah, they really are. See, I began to understand very quickly in my flight training days from those very first lessons that the ways that pilots think up in the cockpit, when we act in those same ways down on the ground with a lot of procedure and structure, and, you know, we follow the rules so that we can do extraordinary things up there in the sky. And I found that when I applied those same principles into how I work on my keynote speeches, how I interact with others, how I operate in my own life, it really started to go more smoothly. And I think of that as using a pilot in command mentality, right? We may not always be in charge of where the whole flight is going, right? In terms of a situation we're in or a workplace, but we are pilot in command of what we're responsible for each day. So it's all about building confidence, doing your research, doing the hard work to deserve to take flight, and then you can really enjoy it once you're up there. And I think the same really applies to all of these flight lessons. And now that I've shared this story with groups like yours, Apple Computers, Boeing, American Express, I'm traveling all over the world now to some of the industry leaders out there sharing these messages. And it's so validating because everyone gets the lessons right away if they have been in an airplane even once, or even if they're just familiar with planes. If they've got a big fear of flying, the analogies still really do make sense.
That's awesome. I like how you wrapped it up with and enjoying yourself, because you know what, a lot of times even in leadership education and those sorts of things, they don't get to that point where you're actually enjoying yourself. You're going through the processes, you're doing things, you're having success, but I love how you ended on the note that you're enjoying yourself. That's the key, right? We all want to do that.
I've heard a lot of intention in what you're saying, Amelia. Do it intentionally, plan intentionally, execute intentionally,
and enjoy
Thank you for picking up on all that. Yeah, and it requires really high standards for yourself. I'm not saying it's easy. Flying around the world was in no way easy. But when you pointed out the enjoying yourself once you achieve your goal, I think oftentimes we skip to the next goal right away. We go, okay, got it done. Now it's on to the next. But when I was on my journey around the globe, right, this was several years of planning, raising close to $2 million to get this trip done with sponsors and project supporters along the way, borrowing this aircraft from a Swiss aircraft manufacturer. There was a moment up there when I'm halfway across the ocean. It happened multiple times, right? Because 80% of this flight around the world was over the open water. But I would find myself relaxing and looking out at the view. And so it's really about looking out the window, right? An aircraft, when we're up in them, the perspective shifts. We all love seeing our hometown from up there in the sky because there's my neighborhood, right? Yeah. It's those little moments that probably won't mean much to anybody else, but for us, it allows us to look back in reflection of how far we've come.
Oh, that's lovely. There's a song, and I can't remember what it's called, but it says, when you get where you're going, don't forget to look back at where you came from. Appreciate your journey.
Yeah. That is a good one. So you're talking a little bit about your journey, sprinkling it in, but for the benefit of our audience, why don't you just kind of start at the beginning and tell your story, how this all came about?
I'll give you the podcast version so I don't take too long. But basically, my parents, Debbie and Glenn Earhart, with the same last name as Amelia, Earhart, spelled the same and everything. When they found out they were having a little girl, my mom goes, let's name her Amelia Earhart.
Of course.
Yeah, my dad says, no. She's going to feel too much pressure with this. Well, mom went out and little Amelia came along. And from a young age, I was told that we shared a distant common ancestry with Amelia. So I grew up with that. Every adult I would meet would say, you better be a pilot someday. And even more, you better fly around the world and finish Amelia Earhart.
No pressure.
No pressure, right?
No pressure. It's funny. I include this photo of myself in these cute little overalls. I may be 5 years old. I've got a flower in my hair and this happy-go-lucky look on my face. And that was the age when people started to put that pressure on me, right? Still in overalls. I still do wear overalls today occasionally. But when that pressure started building up, I got it in my head very early on that if I didn't do this, I wouldn't be living up to this potential that I had been given, or even maybe more of a weight. It felt like a weight on me. But I leaned into it. I've always been a bit of an overachiever. I was on the debate team in high school, things like that. So I thought, let's see if I could get into this. So started flying in college, saved up from random jobs. Let me be clear, there was no pile of cash waiting around so that I could learn how to fly with this Earhart legacy. Okay, we grew up basically in a two-room building that my dad constructed with his own two hands. They brought in the water. They kind of homesteaded this piece of property. So coming to terms with all of this with very limited resources was kind of tough. So when I finally got to do it, that first flight lesson had me hooked. Okay, I thought, wow. Now I see what this is about. It was in a Cessna 172, Boulder, Colorado, gorgeous setting, right? So I knew I had to do it as much as possible. Got through the private license slowly but surely. Along that portion of my life, as I was becoming Amelia Earhart, supposed distant relative of the first Amelia learning to fly, I got a lot of media attention. So ended up working in television and radio because of some of those interview opportunities I did. And I was getting a lot of pressure in my let's say early 20s to really define how I was related to Amelia. That's the first question. Yeah. Okay. So you're a pilot? Yep. Are you related to Amelia? And I would always say that story of what my parents shared with me, but it didn't feel good enough, right? I needed to know the full story. So saved up more to hire a genealogist while paying tuition and flight lessons. So it was like the strangest thing to be saving for as a college student. And I asked for this report, and a couple weeks later, the woman came back and said, Amelia, good news. You are connected to the first Amelia Earhart. You share this distant ancestry traced back to the 1700s. Your family and Amelia's lived in adjacent counties in Pennsylvania, on and on. She said, wow. But if we want to get to that pinpoint connection, we need to go into the European records, and that'll be about $3,500. Oh, wow. And I said, what? And this was back, in the early 2000s. So I thought, there is no way. That was a whole year of college for me, right? So I said, you're telling me I'm related, right? And she said, yes. And when you're ready for more research, you just come on back. Well, as you can imagine, getting that information really kind of bolstered me again. It made me feel like, wow, I do share this connection with this woman. And I went all in. I started telling everybody I was going to meet, everybody I met, I'm going to fly around the world someday. And when you start saying that, the wheels start turning, right? You say a goal out loud, and then someone else hears it and they start asking you about it. And then so-and-so tells so-and-so. So you kind of get known for having this weird future goal, kind of like, I'm not equating it to the difficulty or the education of it, but if someone says, I'm going to be an astronaut someday, you're not just going to let that go away. You're going to check in on them, like, how's it going? So people always wanted to know, how's this flight around the world concept going? So over the course of, about 10 years, but then 2 really intense years, 2012 to 2014, I set out to borrow an aircraft because I didn't own one. Had to finish up an instrument rating, keep building hours, get to the point where I could qualify to do this flight. I would reach out to aviation companies and camera companies and luggage companies, anybody that had anything to do with travel and adventure, right? Do you want to support this journey of a modern day flight around the world with Amelia Earhart? It was so fun, right? I learned how to pitch. I learned how to be an entrepreneur. I learned how to start a business, start a charity, all of this. And the goal was coming to life. I had the plane, had everything lined up, had my co-pilot, which, by the way, people give me a hard time all the time. They say, oh, you didn't fly around the world solo. I said, no, I took a qualified co-pilot with me. I was borrowing a $4.5 million plane, 28,000 miles around a planet. Right. Yes. And if they still give me that disappointed look, I say, well, when was your last flight around the world? Tell me all about it. Right. I digress. But 2014 comes around, I'm getting ready to launch on this flight around the globe. And I get an invitation from the Today Show. Okay. Wow. This is awesome, right? The news side of me is excited. The pilot side is thrilled. And also, I had started the Fly with Amelia Foundation, my charity to put high school girls through flight school and provide them flight training scholarships. So all was well. Nice. I get out to New York and we get there super early in the morning. I've got my PR team with me. And, it's just so exciting to be down there, in that part of the world. And the interview goes great. And at the end of the interview, Natalie Morales, she was there that day with Al Roker and Carson Daly. And she goes, so how are you related to Amelia Earhart? And I said out loud, I said, well, we share this distant common ancestry back to the 1700s, yada, yada. I said, but we don't know exactly how we're connected. But yes, we are somehow related. And she says, oh, that's great. We're all related somehow. Best of luck on your flight around the world. We'll be following your journey, right? And I fly back to Denver. So happy. It went so well in my mind. But when I landed, in a commercial flight, by the way, I don't want people to think I flew myself back and then it went through all of this.
Excellent side note.
Yes. Yeah. So I do have to qualify that. No, I think I was very back of the plane, middle row, because that's all I could afford back then. But it got me back. But when I landed and phone turns back on, I'm getting flooded with messages. And they're not positive, okay? They are, you liar, you fraud, you fake. I can't believe I let my daughter track your flight around the world. What's going on here? Give us the truth. And I'm like, what is happening? So what happened, and this is the very short version of this, but it is the last 2 chapters of the book, if you want the full details. Turns out one of my co-anchors at the TV station where I worked in Denver, maybe he was annoyed with the coverage that my trip was getting and that we had all this talk about it, because we were talking about it quite a bit. And this was when I was on the NBC station here in Denver, 5 days a week on the morning show. And turns out he's an amateur genealogist in his spare time. And he took it upon himself, without telling me, to research my family history. And after they showed the clip of the Today Show on our local affiliate, he was anchoring the news and he announced, he said, I looked into it and she's actually not related to her in any way. She made the whole thing up.
Oh, no.
That's so horribly cruel.
For anybody, but let alone somebody you worked with.
And our desks were right across the newsroom from each other. He could have emailed me in a second or just walked across the room and said something. But he announced it live on television, and then he went to Twitter, the friendliest place on earth. And that's where all those comments were coming from. So essentially, my boss called me in and said, you're embarrassing us. Figure this out. You know, you never want to hear those words from your boss.
Right.
And he said, you have to figure this out immediately. And also, I had a lot on the line. You know, I drilled a hole through the side of a borrowed aircraft, that plane that I had put a 200-gallon auxiliary fuel tank in the back to do this trip. So we had modified it with the pressure. When you break the pressure barrier in an aircraft like that, that's pressurized, it's incredibly complicated, right? So I had contracts with 28 different corporations on the line. So a lot at stake here. And while I was going through this, hired another genealogist. Turns out he was right. My co-anchor went further than my first genealogist did. And then when I hired the second genealogist, he came back and said, Amelia, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but that first genealogist kind of saw you coming. You know, she got you to a certain point with that Earhart last name, but if she would have went into the European records, she would have found that your family tree goes left, Amelia's goes right, and never the two shall cross. He said, your name is just a coincidence.
Oh.
And identity-wise, as you can imagine, this was tough, right? My whole life, I leaned into this identity of, I'm going to honor Amelia. I'm going to send girls to flight school, recreate her flight around the world in a modern day context, and do it because I care about it. And while all this was going on, trust me, there were plenty of, hours. I had to make fast decisions at this time. When you're on TV and all this is happening and you're supposed to do a journey like this, people want answers really quickly. Yeah. So I sat and cried. And then I made one of the smartest decisions I've ever made, which was to call up one of my mentors. And he said to me, Amelia, I think it's time you stop worrying about being related to the first Amelia and instead relate to Amelia. When we relate to one another, we find similar characteristics that we share and we act in those ways. And that immediately gave me freedom. It was like the storm in front of my plane that I was metaphorically flying through. I was seeing the breaks in the clouds, right? The beams of light were coming through, and there was suddenly hope, because I thought, if I can reframe how I exist in this name and this whole world that I've built, if I choose how I move through that, that's actually the more powerful position. And so I'm so proud to tell you that all the sponsors stayed on board, all 100 of my team members around the globe. The flight was a success. I may have a few haters online, but you know what? They're still complaining from the couch, and I was smiling from that airplane.
Yes.
So thank you for listening to that long excursion, but it's sort of necessary to everything we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely. I'm glad to hear it again. That is a great story. Very inspiring, just on how you pivoted and you moved on from what was a very negative experience and could have held you back and could have changed the course of your life, but you persevered. That's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I could have spent a lot of time living in that shadow.
Yes.
I would have backed away and said, oh, you're right, I don't deserve to do this. Well, who deserves to do anything? If you care about it and you're not hurting anybody, and I received new information. My co-anchor gave me new information, and instead of fighting it, and, of course, I did my own research again to see if he was correct, and he was. But then when turbulence is happening around us, and I would consider that turbulence. That was my most intense metaphorical turbulence. In those moments, you have to make quick decisions. You can't wish it wasn't happening. You can't just hide away or expect someone else to act for you. And I think all of us, in some sense of that word, are going to experience turbulence, where it's whether it's health issues, loss of a family member, loss of a job, a financial issue. turbulence is all encompassing. But when we use that pilot in command mentality, it means that we pursue other routes. We look for other ways we can go. And for me, that heading change from being related to, shifting to relating to, literally changed the entire trajectory of my life. And I think that's why I'm sitting here with you today.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So you had somebody inspiring you. You just didn't realize in which way.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. So based on what you've been through and your very ambitious goals that you reached, what advice would you have to a young person today, maybe a young woman in your flight school? What advice do you give those girls who have those same goals and beyond?
Well, they reach out to me all the time, which is so fun.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I got an email the other day from a young rocket scientist who said, I'm trying to figure out how to pay for flight school. And so I started a conversation with her and sent her a copy of the book. And I think the advice I would give is it's not going to be picture perfect. Okay. It's not going to look like it does on social media, especially for the younger generation. Their whole life, they have been seeing these curated moments online of other people's existence. And I definitely have become more that way through the years, right? As I sort of shared less online and stay a little bit more protected because social media can be a scary place. But remembering that real life journeys, for instance, Amelia's flight in 1937 with her navigator, Fred Noonan, mine in 2014, any journey that you go on, it's going to look like a squiggly mess of lines, and it is your job to sort of backtrack and untangle it, right? Destination first, and then you backtrack to fill in every detail along the way for what's going to take to get you there. And it's important to have a good flight crew around you. I love thinking about the different flight crew members that we have in our lives. Like you two are co-pilots on this journey, right?
Yes.
And you've got your producer here as well. So they're a part of this crew that keeps the operation moving forward. So I love to ask, when someone is working towards a big goal, who's your baggage handler in life? Who,
good one.
in the middle of the night, when the boxes don't show up and you've got to go to a store and figure out how to get everything you need for the event you're throwing, who's going to be there for you? Who's going to do the heavy lifting? Who's your air traffic controller? Who can you ask for guidance that's not seeing the same storm that you're currently stuck in, where you can go, hey, do you have an outside perspective on what I'm flying through right now? Because that's what my mentor did for me. He said, look, you are qualified to do this. You have figured out how to put together this entire team of people. If you really think you can fly around the world, you got to prove it, right? But he said, the airspace is clear. You're still allowed to do it. You may have those voices in your head that are louder from the haters and the naysayers, who, by the way, they still chime into me to this day, 11 years after my flight around the world. So advice of asking the trusted people in your life for guidance, as opposed to that sort of anonymous voice that you think is what people want you to do, right? That's a volume knob we can turn down in a sense. Yeah. So, but really every single chapter of the book is a different piece of advice in a way. Every chapter is a flight lesson, and it shares a story from the around the world journey with one of these aviation metaphors, like the art of navigating the holding pattern.
I feel like sometimes I need that chapter.
Yeah, I can't wait to read this book.
Well, COVID was a good example of a holding pattern, right? When pilots are flying, if air traffic control comes on and says, we have to put you into a hold, which essentially is this oval flight pattern in a very slow speed, but it keeps separation between aircraft if there's something going on at an airport, a fire, an accident, a huge storm in the way. So holding patterns in life, we don't like them, right? No pilot wants to be put into a hold. We want to keep going to our destination. So yes, they are frustrating, but when you're in a holding pattern, the best thing you can do is to prepare for whatever you want to do as soon as you get clearance to exit. Do you remember people during the pandemic who had been working on businesses at home and they were ready to launch? And those of us who, when the world kind of came back to normal, were like, what do we do now? Right?
Yeah.
Those are very intentional choices, and they do, again, require a lot of hard work, but it's that pilot in command mentality that keeps you really thinking 5 steps ahead. There's a term that pilots love to use. They say, stay ahead of the airplane. That means you got to anticipate 5 or 6 steps ahead. That way, when it comes, you're ready. You're not shocked and then catching your breath and confused, especially in critical phases of flight. And when we stay ahead of the plane here on the ground, we are prepared, right? We can anticipate the challenges that will probably pop up, and we don't pretend like they won't. And I think it gives a sense of calm to everybody that we share airspace with, like the three of us. I can tell that we're prepared for today. It feels good. But if we were all scrambling and discombobulated, it wouldn't be the best product we could put out. So staying ahead means anticipating what we know to be true most of the time.
I can't wait to get my hands on this book.
Well, same with me, and I love your message of preparedness and perseverance.
Brad's nodding his head too.
Yes. So we need a copy for Brad as well, and everyone listening. So where can our listeners purchase the book, Amelia?
Yes, and what is the title of it?
Yes.
So the title is Learn to Love the Turbulence, Flight Lessons on Becoming Pilot in Command of Your Own Journey. And you can get it on Amazon, or you can grab a signed copy through my website, and I will sign that here and ship it to you directly. And I certainly don't mean to make this a commercial for the book. It was just the biggest sort of announcement since we had last connected.
Certainly.
I know that I had promised it all those years back. So it's kind of exciting to share that the keynote has evolved into having even more lessons, that I didn't even know right away. Sometimes it takes years to extract the lessons from these big things we go through. So I know a lot of people out there are probably working on a book of their own.
Yes.
Just know that for the girl who flew a plane around the world, it took me equally as long to write this book. So it's like
that is interesting to know.
That's awesome.
You got to use your strengths. But for instance, when I knew like that cursor, that Word doc was staring at me when I'm trying to work on these stories, I hit a limit. I said, you know what? I need help, and that is okay. So I hired a co-author, Kristen Clark Taylor.
Oh, good.
So it's okay to do things as a team, right? There's no harm in having a co-pilot on your journey, because I never would have put that out, especially at the same quality level, if she wouldn't have been extracting those stories from me. I did all the writing, and then she would sort of rework and say more of this, less of this. But working with somebody else, that outside perspective, keeps us in check. And I think it's been part of the biggest success of the book.
How lovely.
Love it.
Yeah.
And if people, I'm sure there are a lot of people listening and watching who would love to have you come and speak to their groups, to their clubs, to their organizations. How can they reach you?
So my website is ameliaroseearhart.com. I should have mentioned that before, but just my full name. Send me a contact note there, and I'll get you set up with all the right folks. And, the speaking schedule is wild. It is taking me all over the world now. I was in Barcelona last year.
Wow.
Iceland. I'm going to an event up in Canada with the Canadian Airport Authority in Quebec. So
awesome.
What I love to do for different organizations, if I can swing it, if it's a nonprofit or a community event, if I'm in the area, I always love to donate my time for those situations. So when that opportunity comes up, I love to find those opportunities, because I know that's what you stand for as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that. We will definitely keep in touch.
Yes, I know the feedback we received after your presentation was incredible.
Absolutely.
You were so well loved by our audience, our members. So don't feel like this is a sales pitch. I think they've been waiting for your story. They're going to be excited to come back and see where you've gone.
And we're so excited to see how far you've come and excited to continue to follow your journey and to stay in touch.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for joining us. This was so fun to hear more, and we will be in touch, and we'll look forward to reading that book. My gosh.
Well, Tracy and Christy, I thank you so much, and thank you for being such an important, I call them waypoints along my journey. Those little moments where something positive happens and it reminds you why you're in flight,
Yes.
why you're doing it, why it feels good, that positive feedback. So not only our first interaction in 2018 was one of those waypoints, this is a connecting waypoint that reminds me that I'm doing the right thing. And you are too, because I think the internet needs more positive content like this that's all about self-improvement and working well with others. So I really respect what you do, and I just thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Well, to learn more about our dynamic, awesome speaker, please visit AmeliaRoseEarhart.com. And to learn more about the Exchange Club, please visit nationalexchangeclub.org. Thanks for listening to this episode of Talk Exchange. Wow, you're amazing.
We could have done this for an hour and a half easily.
My gosh, I know.